My name is Larry App from the Bristol, Indiana Heritage Society. The title of this program is Snyder County, Pennsylvania, Getting to Know Bristol's Roots. The reason is that when the Bristol area was first settled, many of the people who came here were from Snyder County, Pennsylvania. Most of the rest came from the eastern states like New York, Maine, and New Hampshire. Here's a map of Pennsylvania showing Snyder County right in the middle in red. The state was founded by William Penn, who was an English writer, theologian, and influential Quaker. He was born in 1644 and was a big proponent of democracy and religious freedom. Pennsylvania was formed in 1681 when King Charles II granted Penn a large tract of land, which corresponds to today's Pennsylvania and Delaware. His vision was for a colony that would be a refuge for Quakers and other persecuted religious groups, particularly ones from Germany, that offered freedom of worship and democratic governance. The goal was to create an ideal Christian commonwealth where people could live in peace. This is a map of Pennsylvania through 1770. In the lower right, it shows the originally named counties of Bucks, Philadelphia, Chester, and Lancaster. Later counties named were York, Cumberland, Berks, Northampton, Bedford, Northumberland, and Westmoreland. This is a nice map because it shows some of the more recently named counties. You can see that Snyder County is in the middle of it all. After the Revolutionary War in 1776, Union County formed out of Northumberland County in 1813. Still later, Snyder County was formed out of Union County in 1855 and was named after Simon Snyder. It always interests me as to why certain things happen, such as why was Snyder County formed? I found out the reason was that the creation of Snyder County was driven by economic rivalries and political interests within the southern part of Union County. The split reflected these deep divides, and the formation of Snyder County was seen as a victory for the German population who lived in the southern part and were farmers. Here you can see a more modern, simplified map of the area around Snyder County. And here you can see Snyder County with all of its townships, with a few cities thrown in, like Selinsgrove, Freeburg, Middleburg, which is the county seat, Beavertown, and McClure. In 2020, the population of Snyder County was about 40,000. As a comparison, Elkhart County's population was about 200,000 at that time. So we were about 5 times larger. Today, Snyder County was settled in the mid-1700s. Some people were from New York State and some were from eastern Pennsylvania. They had a lot of difficulties with the Indians because of broken treaties and so forth, and the problems continued until about 1781. As I said, the county was named for Simon Snyder, who lived here and was a 3-term Pennsylvania governor. He's buried in the cemetery behind Sharon Lutheran Church in Selinsgrove, sometimes called the First Lutheran Church. On my first visit to the church in 1992, I couldn't find the cemetery. I drove around the block several times, couldn't find it. The stone slabs were actually laid flat, and the cemetery is raised slightly above the street so that I couldn't see it from the car. Anthony Seelan was the brother-in-law of Simon Snyder. Selinsgrove, which was spelled as 2 words until about 1894, Seelan's Grove, began to be laid out in lots by 1784 by John Snyder, Simon's brother. Many who came to Snyder County were Pennsylvania German, and the county reflects its culture. Mostly they were farmers, and they spoke a peculiar dialect that derived from the peasant tongue of the German and Swiss homeland. Even today, it's an unwritten language, although it can be casually written phonetically. They were known as Pennsylvania Dutch, and for their thrift, honesty, and dedication to hard work. And something I didn't know is that they were earlier known as the Dumb Dutch D-U-M-B, Dutch, because when a question was asked of them in English, they wouldn't know how to reply since they didn't know the language. In their silence, they resembled someone who could not speak. The word Dutch, D-U-T-C-H, by the way, is an anglicized form of the German word Dutch, or Deutsch, D-E-U-T-S-C-H, and doesn't have anything to do with the Dutch of the Netherlands. The early settlers' log homes were built as 1.5 stories, with the loft having a ladder that was pulled up at night to protect against Indians, while the front door was left open for ventilation in hot weather. Glass windows had a special tax applied. Those who owned more than 10 panes of glass were subject to something called a window tax. Many families used oiled paper or glass bottles encased in a frame for interior lighting to keep the costs low. Here's a map of Snyder County showing townships and towns. When the county was formed from the southern portion of Union County in 1855, Middleburg became the county seat. Other town and place names evolved in the area, such as Freeburg, Washington Township, Shamokin Dam, McClure, Beavertown, Hummel's Wharf, Kratzerville, Kramer, Penns Creek, Port Trevorton, and Troxelville. Snyder County had a good share of men who fought in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican War, Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, and all of the more recent wars. During the Civil War, the only company formed entirely by Snyder County men who enlisted for a 3-year term of service was Company G of the 147th Regiment of the Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. It was also referred to as the only all-German-speaking company in the war. They fought in many of the major battles, such as Gettysburg, Lookout Mountain in Tennessee, Chancellorsville, Rocky Face Ridge, and more. As you can see, 2 of my relatives were brothers, Solomon, and they called him Solly, S-O-L-L-Y, and Jeremiah, they called him Jerry, J-E-R-E, App. They were together in Company G for a full term and until the war ended. Anyone who fought during the Civil War was just tougher than nails. We should be proud of the spirit and toughness of the ones who came here from Snyder County and how their ethic has shaped life in our area. For example, Company G was located at the base of Culp's Hill on July 3, 1863, the last day of the Battle at Gettysburg. A massive cannonade took place with over 300 cannons firing at the same time. It created such a deafening roar that it was heard over 100 miles away in places like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and even Harrisburg. Sergeant Michael Schroyer was the diarist for the company, and in his journal he recounted that day.
Many narrow escapes were made during this battle. James P. Ulrich's gun stock was shattered while he held it in his hand. After the last charge on the right of our line by the rebels about 10 o'clock a.m., everything became very quiet. Both armies, nearly exhausted by the hard work of our marches and the 3 days' battle, soon fell asleep. About 1:30 p.m., a signal gun was discharged. Then a reply from the other side, after which was experienced one of the greatest artillery duels of the war. About 300 cannons belched forth death and destruction everywhere. The air was full of screeching and bursting shells. This was kept up for about 1 hour and a half. The very earth trembled during this time.
The settlers who came to Bristol in the mid to late 1800s were from 2 basic areas. The settlers from New York and other eastern states tended to be professionals and entrepreneurs. The settlers from Snyder County, Pennsylvania were mostly farmers and stock raisers. They all brought their culture, values, and work ethic along with them. We can see the Snyder County family farms pretty much in the northwest of Bristol in this 1874 map. Here we have the town of Bristol, and in the northwest corner of the township, Washington Township, we have the farming properties of Mingus, Gemberling, Kinney, Deal, Hilbish, Pontius, some more Kinneys here, and let's see, Orand, John Henry App, and here's a Hilbish over here, and there's another Hilbish up here. If we look just to the west of Bristol, we come across the Zion Lutheran Church right here. Most of the immigrants in this area, the farmers, attended that church. We can still see evidence of this Snyder County cohesiveness on this 1892 map. Again, we have the town of Bristol here, and if we look to the northwest, we see some property by Mingus, Rhine, Deal, Hilbish. Here's a Sarah App, and we have some Kinneys and some Bickles, who appear to have bought some of the App land from John Henry App. Some more Bickles down here. And you can see that even after 18 years since the last plat map, we have plenty of Snyder County families who are still farming together. And the church is still right over here, and the church still exists today. It's interesting to compare photos of buildings and landscapes from Selinsgrove to Bristol's photos for similarity. On my first visit to Snyder County in 1992, I noticed quite a bit of resemblance to the Bristol area in the farm fields and in the town buildings. It was almost as if Snyder County scenes could be lifted out and placed in the Bristol area. Here's a picture of the trolley station in Selinsgrove. And here's the trolley station in Bristol. There's a noticeable similarity between the building construction of windows and roof supports in particular. This is the first Weiss grocery store in Selinsgrove, W-E-I-S-S. Today, Weiss is a very well-known grocery chain on the East Coast with over 200 stores. And here's the building in Bristol on the southwest corner of Division and Fistula Streets that we might know as the Scammahorn Hardware Building. There are quite a few similarities in look here. Here's the interior of a store in Snyder County's Middleburg. We can compare that with a store in Bristol. Here you can see a nice photo of the post office in Middleburg with 8 of its employees in front. Compare this with a photo in the front of the Bristol post office where 8 of its employees are in front. The railroad depot in Selinsgrove is in this picture. Compare its building structure to the Bristol depot and see the similarity. Anyway, I found it interesting to pull out just a few pictures from both communities to show you. Bristol must have felt very comfortable to the Snyder County people arriving, since some of our architecture may have originated in Pennsylvania. Since many who came here from Snyder County were farmers, I found an interesting story that makes me feel proud of the forward thinking and work ethic that came along with them to Bristol. There was a man named John App who was born in 1793 and who fought in the War of 1812. He was a farmer living in Selinsgrove who for a period of time operated 2 farms. His father's, the one he grew up on, and the one he himself purchased adjoining Selinsgrove's downtown on the west. This is a grist mill on the original App farm along Penns Creek that was also used for a time as a distillery. And this is a short story about John App using his ingenuity to make a difference in farming practices. The pictures are also from the App farm.
His father's farm had a mill and liquor distillery on it for a number of years, the distillery having been established by his father. The whiskey was then a universal beverage. Nearly everybody used it. Even the clergy was not exempt from the habit. The result of its use was continual evil, especially in the harvest field, where the workmen often became intoxicated and were found lying in the fence corners. They would engage in personal brawls, and it was sometimes difficult to prevent a general fight. As a farmer himself, he saw these sad results and determined to effect a reformation, and in consequence became the first temperance reformer in the community. His still was at once abandoned. The use of whiskey was banished from his premises and was to be used no more in his harvest field. He said that his harvests must be reaped without the use of whiskey, but adding that he would pay 10 cents extra wages to all who would work without its use. This aroused a general opposition. His former hands declared they would not work for him. Even his pastor discouraged him, but he declared that rather than give whiskey again, he would go 40 miles to find hands. It was now proclaimed that on a certain Monday morning, the harvesting of the App wheat would be commenced, and a general invitation was extended saying that work would be given to all, and that 10 cents a day would be given to all who would work without the use of whiskey. The eventful Monday morning came. At 4 o'clock in the morning, a voice called at the outside of Mr. App's window, wishing to know whether work could be had, and if it were true that 10 cents a day extra would be given for doing without whiskey. "Yes, it is true," was the reply. "Well, we will work for you for the extra 10 cents and do without whiskey." Then adding, "But we have brought our wives and daughters with us. Can they also have work?" "They shall have work," was the reply, "and an extra cup of coffee or milk and 5 meals a day." By this time, the whole community seemed to be pouring into John App's to see how the no whiskey in the harvest field would succeed. Soon, there were more applicants for work than could be accommodated. The harvesting progressed rapidly and harmoniously, and was soon brought to a close. No whiskey in the harvest field had triumphed, and it was admitted that John App was the first victor in the local war against King Alcohol.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how education was handled in Snyder County, but to understand that, we first need to know something about a split within the Lutheran Church in the mid-1800s. Most of the people who came to Bristol from Snyder County were of the Lutheran faith, since most of the Germans who came to Snyder County from Germany were Lutheran. The Zion Lutheran Church, northwest of Bristol, is evidence of that with its fairly large cemetery next to it. Prior to 1843, preaching in the Lutheran Church at Selinsgrove had been in the German language. By now, the need for services spoken in English was felt by many to be a necessity. The young people were quickly becoming English, and they needed to be provided with English preaching or be lost to the church. As you can imagine, the subject was controversial, and the search was on for a pastor who would devote himself to the English interests of the congregation. A young man, Reverend Henry Ziegler, who had just been licensed by the West Pennsylvania Synod, was interested in the position. He graduated from the Lutheran Seminary at Gettysburg, and in the fall of 1843 walked all the way from there to Selinsgrove to discuss the position. It was about a 90-mile hike. The only promise of support came from John App when he said,
"We cannot promise you any regular salary for the present, but I will give you house und room und board gratis."
This was accepted, and Reverend Ziegler began his work as pastor. It was not long before the German language was totally abandoned in the church, and services in English took its place. At this time, the new Lutheran Church in Selinsgrove split with the First Lutheran Church. While the First Lutheran Church kept the old style of services, all German speech and no music, the new Lutheran Church adopted the new style of worship of English speech and some music. The two churches were located only a block from each other in Selinsgrove. As a side note, in the town of Bristol, there were Catholic, Methodist, Episcopal, and Presbyterian churches. In the farming community northwest of town, Zion Lutheran always practiced the new style of worship. Coming back to education in Snyder County, John App felt badly about not having a formal education himself. On his own, he became a good reader and learned writing and arithmetic enough to keep his own accounts and manage his business. After his father's death, he took over the farm at age 35. This is a view looking toward the original App farm north of Selinsgrove. There was no school at all in the surrounding community for his children, so John put up a building on his own property and designated it as a one-room schoolhouse and hired a teacher whose salary he paid personally. John was known as the father of English schools in the area and invited his neighbors to send their children to his school free of charge. The children all spoke German at home, and few, if any of them, understood English. The teacher didn't understand German, but the students needed to be taught English. The rule was that no German should be spoken in the schoolroom, and today it might be called an English immersion school. It was hard work, but the students gradually learned to read and speak the English language. It was the beginning of English schools in the area. Higher education was now on the radar, and this building is Selinsgrove Hall. In the summer of 1857, Henry Ziegler began raising funds for establishing a Lutheran seminary in Snyder County. It was to be called the Missionary Institute, and today it is called Susquehanna University. After the fundraising was completed, Reverend Ziegler made a proposal to the Council of the Second Lutheran Church to locate the institute in Selinsgrove. After some discussion, the council wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. John App stood and addressed the meeting, saying,
"Don't be too hasty, brethren. Let us at least make an effort. I will give $1,500 to start a subscription."
That amount would be worth around $55,000 today. Encouraged by his statement, the council decided that they should go ahead with the plan. A committee was appointed to raise donations from the area. In about 10 days, $22,000, about $820,000 today, was raised, and the Missionary Institute was established in Selinsgrove. John's brother, Leonard App, who was born in 1790, was also a huge supporter of higher education. He had a heart for women's higher education, which was unusual at that time. Leonard's home was located on Market Street on the north end of Selinsgrove and was rather large, as you can see. In 1858, he donated his house to establish what would be called the Susquehanna Female College. So both institutions were established in 1858, but operated separately from each other. 15 years later, in 1873, the Susquehanna Female College was merged into the Missionary Institute, and the campus became coeducational. By 1895, the combined institution had grown and was called Susquehanna University. When walking through cemeteries in Bristol and Selinsgrove, we can find many names that are the same. For example, Ziegler, Snyder, Orend, and Walter in Bristol Zion Lutheran Cemetery. This is an interesting stone because Mrs. Walter died in 1892 and is apparently buried here, while Mr. Walter died in 1875, 17 years after his wife, and is buried in Selinsgrove. It makes a memorial stone for him and a burial stone for her. This might be an interesting story to research. In Selinsgrove's Union Cemetery, we have stones for App, Kantz, and Gemberling. Other common names from both communities include Bickle, Bickert, Boyer, Dunbaugh, Fisher, Hilbish, Kinney, Kraus, Menges, Pontius, Rhine, and Rausch. There are more, but these are a few that I had a chance to research. I'll finish up with a few vintage photos from Snyder County.